There's nothing worse as a football fan than drafting some trash. I'm going to go through each and every single NFL team and find their worst player since 2020 and since 2015. And the same player can appear twice if they're bad enough. This video is going to be the NFC. Tune in next week for the AFC. Also, be sure to comment if I'm wrong, if I'm right. I'm always about improving, so let me know where I get it wrong. Starting off with the Commanders, we have Emmanuel Forbes since 2020. Never really looked the part and never actually played the part either. After getting cooked, burnt, toasted on a week-to-week basis, they shipped him off to the Rams. And this pick looks worse considering they passed up a better corner, possibly two better corners, shortly after in the first round. And then for 2015, I could have put Forbes again, but I'm going to put Darius Geis just because he never really played and he's had legal trouble, so it's kind of crazy. You don't want that from a draft pick. And the guys that just narrowly missed the cut are Chase Young. I got my eye on you, buddy. Jahan Dotson and Sua Cravens. You probably don't know who that is, but I do. I made a video on him like 9 years ago, so he busted though. It's unfortunate. Up next, we have my Giants, and from 2020, our obvious worst draft pick has been Evan Neal. He's never been even if he was playable, that would be something, but he's actually not playable and actually a liability on the field. So that's why he's the worst pick. So for 2015, he's also still the worst pick as well. Now I know you're probably thinking, oh, Daniel Jones is the worst pick. I would disagree. He did lead the Giants to a playoffs for 1 year. He had a couple of good moments. Evan Neal has never had any good moments. There was a lot of people to pick from though. We had Kadarius Toney, Eli Apple, Daniel Jones, like I said, Eric Flowers. Yeah, that was a bad time. We've had a lot of bad drafts, so it's tough. But Evan Neal takes the cake for the worst draft pick. And now if we look at the Cowboys, from 2020 we have Kelvin Joseph. Now I'm not an avid Cowboys fan at all, obviously. But I remember training camp clips of this guy getting cooked by CeeDee Lamb and everybody on the team. And as it turns out, he was indeed trash. He left in the middle of a game once and he got traded to the Dolphins and has been a journeyman ever since. And then since 2015, we got Taco Charlton. If you watched my last video, you know I mentioned him then. He's been garbage. First round pick and hasn't done anything. Low-key, the Cowboys don't have huge misses, but we have Jalen Smith here, Mozzie Smith, and Tristan Hill. All these guys are fairly mid. So they're in the honorable mention section. Now the Eagles are notoriously good at drafting, so this was a little bit more of a challenge, but not actually. We had to go back to 2020 and we could get Jalen Reagor. Obvious horrible draft pick for them there. Didn't really ever produce at all. And then since 2015, I put Nelson Aguilar here, but you can probably just swap in Jalen Reagor again. He's pretty bad. So these two receivers are probably their biggest misses of the past decade, which says something. And even in the honorable mention, the only guy I got here is Wentz, and even he almost won an MVP. So we got to get Howie out of there, guys. He's a little bit of a nuisance. Up next, we have the Rams, which is another tough team because not only do they draft well, they don't have that many picks at all as it is that really mean anything. So since 2020, I put Cam Akers here, just because he never actually played well for their team and he never really had a role. I think he beefed with Sean McVay. You can't beef with your coach and be a good draft pick. So that's why he's 2020, and he's also 2015 as well. Now, this is just because, like I said, they don't really draft bad, and all the picks that matter, they kind of hit on. So for our honorable mention, we have Jared Goff here. Again, he took them to a Super Bowl, but they traded him, so that's why he's in the honorable mention section. I could have just kind of found some random lineman that I got, but I'm not sure that really counts as a bad draft pick, just a random lineman. So I'll throw in Logan Bruss too, whoever that is. All right, up next we have the Cardinals. So for 2020, we have Isaiah Simmons. Isaiah Simmons was supposed to be a generational athlete. He was supposed to be a hybrid linebacker, safety, defensive end, corner, slot back. And then he just was all of those things, but very mid at all of them. I think he had one good year, but he never really quite figured out his position with the Cardinals and eventually was traded to the Giants. And then when we move to 2015, we have the golden boy Josh Rosen. Now, he never panned out and never lived up to any type of his expectations, so he got replaced after 1 year by Kyler Murray. And then an honorable mention, we have Robert Nkemdiche, athletic freak. Definitely was supposed to work, and he just didn't work. And then Andy Isabella, I think they drafted him before DK Metcalf, and that's extremely nuts since he's a 6'4", 230 wide receiver from Ole Miss versus Andy Isabella, who's 5'9", 167 and from UMass. So they probably overthought it there. The Seahawks was an interesting one to get through. So since 2020, we're going to go with Charles Cross, the tackle. I've seen him play a couple times because I've just seen Kayvon Thibodeau beat him a few times, which is like a red flag for me right there. And I just think he probably hasn't performed the way that the Seahawks would like him to, and hasn't become like an anchor there at tackle like they would like him. So Charles Cross for 2020. For 2015, this was a little bit of a challenge as well, but then I came across Mr. Malik McDowell. So he was their second round pick. Well, it was the first pick of their draft, but he was their second round pick in 2017, and he actually never even played a single snap for them. Like, he got signed, and then he like crashed a quad in the offseason and never like reported to a single practice. And then shortly after that, he got like arrested for battery or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but I might have to do a video on like careers cut short by like injury and like arrest soon. But Malik McDowell, definitely a gigantic bust there for them. For the honorable mention, I'm going to have CJ Prosise and Rashad Penny. Both of these guys are like the same back, but like a different time. Like, they were supposed to be good, but they just never were. So honorable mention for them. For the 49ers, it's kind of funny. They actually are not good at drafting at the top of drafts. Like they're amazing after round 3. So it's kind of funny. But it's hard to miss as hard as they did on Trey Lance. So he's going to be the pick for 2020 and since 2015. So worst pick of the decade. Yeah, so if your top pick can't get on the field, your top quarterback pick can't get on the field over Brock Purdy, over Sam Darnold, over who else was it? Porn star Jimmy. You can't beat out porn star Jimmy? What else can I say? That's a bad pick. And for our honorable mention, it's a little bit fun still. We got Reuben Foster, we got Dante Pettis, and we got Javon Kinlaw. And I loved all these guys, so kind of disappointing. For the Bucks, it's a little bit of a mixed bag because since 2020 they've been solid, but before that they were garbage. So from 2020, I put their worst draft pick as Keyshawn Vaughn. They drafted him in 2020. He hasn't done much since as a running back. He was a third round, so this is a bit of a stretch, but that's what I have for 2020. But for 2015, since then, I have Roberto Aguayo. Now, I had a couple of different players to choose from, but they chose a kicker in the second round, and he only lasted a year with the team. And in that year, he was the worst in the NFL in field goal percentage. So, like, that's doubly horrible. And then for honorable mention, I put O.J. Howard, Vernon Hargreaves, and Jameis Winston. We love Jameis, but he's not the best draft pick of all time. If you made it this far and you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. And if you comment Roberto Aguayo and your Cash App, I'll send you a little something for being so retentive. Now I'm going to pick it back up with the Saints. Now the Saints are a little funny because I think their drafting strategy is just to pick a very like high floor players and then try to get the juice in free agency. But that's neither here nor there. So from 2020, I got their worst pick being Zach Bond, only because he was super mid for the time he was there. And then as soon as he leaves, he becomes like an all-pro player and a defensive player of the year candidate. Seems a little too crazy to me, so I'm going to put him there for 2020 for them. And then for 2015, or since 2015 I should say, I have Stephon Anthony. He was an inside linebacker that never really put it together, left the team, and I think he tried to come back or something, but I checked the Reddit and they said he was garbage. So Stephon Anthony, you're here for 2015. And then for honorable mention, I put Trevor Penning and Andres Pete, two linemen that are all right. I guess there's mixed reviews, but I never heard anything great about either of these guys, so I have them here in honorable mention. For the Falcons, it's another case of they kind of draft at the top of their draft. They kind of draft safe players, I feel like. And I know people are probably going to start screaming Kyle Pitts at me, but he's actually not a bad player. He's bad in fantasy, yeah, but he's not a bad player. So for them, I'm going to go to a guy named Marlon Davidson. He only lasted 2 years with the team. Played defensive end and never really put up any significant stats. So he seems pretty bad for them there. So I'm going to put him here for 2020. And then since 2015, I'm actually going to go Jalen Collins. He was drafted in 2015, only played 2 years. And what's funny is now he is on a podcast. I don't know if you guys watched the Raw Room. I watched it. It's pretty funny. I had no idea that he was I just never researched him and I came across this. And for honorable mention, I'm not even sure. They just have a bunch of solid players and late picks. They don't have that many picks. They don't have that many players, and I don't want to do anybody from 2024 or 2023 like that. So I guess I'll just throw Kyle Pitts in the honorable mention then. And for the Panthers, this is another kind of a tough one. They have a lot of super mid guys. So since 2020, I'm going to go with Matt Corral, the quarterback. I know they only drafted him in the third round, but I think he played even less than they would have expected, and he never really quite gained his footing, and he never really quite even was established in the league as even a backup. And then since 2015, I'm going to have to go with Devin Funchess. In 2015, he was drafted as a wide receiver, was kind of fat and slow, changed to a tight end. I could have went Calvin Benjamin here for this too, but he's 2014, so same story, different year. So then for my honorable mention, I'm going to put my boy Ikem Ekwonu, my boy Icky. I'm gonna put Jonathan Mingo on honorable mention as bad draft pick watch. Actually, Jonathan Mingo, you're on watch, buddy. You're on watch. Now, moving along to the Bears, this was a little tricky, but I think you still kind of have to give it to Justin Fields as being the worst pick since 2020, just because they picked a quarterback in the top 11. They expected him to take them to the promised land, and he can never quite do that. He had a lot of good moments, but I think everybody knows that he just isn't that good at playing quarterback holistically, but he's still a good playmaker. But that's nothing in comparison to the 2015 bust in Kevin White. He was a one-year wonder at West Virginia. I think he had a good game against Alabama. So if you have a good game against Alabama and you're a receiver, you're going to go within like the top 2 rounds no matter what you actually do for the rest of the games. So after that, he got drafted in like the top 10, but in the NFL, he never actually panned out as a good receiver. Definitely not a number 1 receiver. And in the honorable mention, we got Mitch Trubisky. Now, you're probably wondering why he's not actually a selection for one of these picks, but at the same time, he still made it to the playoffs, so got to give that to him. And now moving on to the Vikings. For their top pick, or their worst pick, I should say, since 2020, I got Andrew Booth. He was a cornerback. He never really played that well, and then they traded him to the Cowboys within like 2 years of within his first 2 years for just like another corner. And I think he got cut from the Cowboys after that too, so definitely not a good player. And then since 2015, I got my boy Laquan Treadwell. Now maybe this is a personal bias because I wanted him to be good, but he just never was slow, and was just like a bad player overall. So that's why for 2015, I got Laquan Treadwell. For the honorable mention, I got Irv Smith and I got Mike Hughes. Irv Smith, I just thought he was going to be better, so I put him in here because he just was not that good. And then for Mike Hughes, he was a first round pick of theirs in like 2018, but he had like a bunch of injuries, like neck injuries, ACL injuries, and never actually like played for the team in any significant way. So honorable mention for him right there. The Packers are another one of those teams that draft really well and don't have a lot of like tons of draft picks that are like in the top rounds because of whatever trades and whatever kind of like transactions they make. So since 2020, I had to dip deep in my bag and I picked out Amari Rodgers, the Clemson wide receiver, in the 3rd round. He never actually played really well, and I thought he was gonna be good coming out of Clemson because all the Clemson receivers are good. But he never had any significant role for the Packers in a significant way. And then since 2015, I have the cornerback Kevin King. He never really made any type of an impact on the team. Was supposed to be a top corner, but it just never worked out that way. So for the Packers, I got Amari Rodgers and Kevin King. And the honorable mention, it was hard. I couldn't find anybody. So Packer fans, I'm gonna need you guys to step in and help me out here and let me know who's actually garbage and who should actually be here. The Lions are a little bit of a funny situation as well. So since 2020, they've drafted pretty well. One bad draft pick they got here, I'm gonna put in is Jeff Okudah. He was supposed to be a generational cornerback talent. So it's kind of not their fault, but he never panned out and actually became that. So it was a little bit of a letdown, especially since being a 3rd pick. He never really lived up to that 3rd pick at all. But before 2020, they were garbage, so there's a lot of people I could have picked from. But since 2015, I decided to go with old Tease Tabor. He was supposed to be another top corner. I remember at the time everybody was Tease Tabor's one of the top 2. I think he was there with Vernon Hargreaves and whatnot too. Yeah, so he never panned out as well. He was also pretty I think he was just straight trash. So that's a bad pick right there. And then in the honorable mention is a myriad of mid players. So we have Jared Davis, we got Amir Abdullah, Kerryon Johnson, and DeAndre Swift. So that's all the NFC teams. We're gonna do the AFC teams next Wednesday after I react to the Super Bowl on Monday. Please like and subscribe, comment your comments, and again, appreciate y'all. Peace.